Hawks21 here, back with another Splinterlands video. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the big three. I would say the big 2.5. Guard Llama is the half, Yodin, and Kitty. I see a lot of comments on any of the videos I make about Grandmaster Rathe, about how new players are super disappointed in sort of the quality of the card, and that they're expecting summoners from this Chaos Legion airdrop that are on par with these three. And I want to let everyone down easy and let you know that that's probably not going to happen. And in this video, I'll explain why. Before I get into all that, if you enjoy my content or if you learn anything new from it, it would be awesome if you can like and subscribe as we march closer to that 1,000 subscriber benchmark. Okay, so as I said, people seem upset at how good Grandmaster Rathe is. And that's because they are comparing them to the best 3 Untamed Summoner legendary airdrops, which there's a couple problems for that. First, we have no idea where Grandmaster Rathe is going to sit in the hierarchy of Chaos Legion summoners, right? He could be the worst one, he could be the middle one, maybe he is the best one. If he was the best one, maybe I would see a little bit of the side of the new players, like, come on, this isn't even close. But one, I think he's a super underrated card. I think people are going to realize once they start using him more and more, the different types of plays that can be done with him at sort of every level of the game. I'm personally waiting for hopefully his price to fall a little bit as more people buy packs and open him and try to sell him. But I will eventually get a max level of this card, and I'm super excited to do so. The other reason is because the game isn't going to purposely put in more cards that are as game breaking and powerful as these cards. That's what power creep is. And now think about this with me for a second, right? So the new players are sitting here now, and I kind of feel weird as a little in-between state, right? Like looking at these big 3, looking at all of the legendary Chaos Legion Untamed Summoners, the only one I own is Kitty. These 5 I don't own. I came in at a weird point where these had started to get really, really expensive, and I couldn't afford them. And I ultimately made the decision to get Kitty, and I started buying Kitty to a gold level when Kitty was cheaper than Scarred Llama and Yodin, and it wasn't even very close. Scarred Llama for a period of time was on par with Yodin, and they were both far above Kitty. This is months and months and months and months ago. But early on, I sort of realized how insane Kitty is and how difficult it is to counter Kitty. So I was there early enough to start accumulating Kitty, but I wasn't here so early that I was getting these guys super, super cheap. So I actually only have one of them. So I'm not coming from a perspective of me having all of these. I'm coming from the perspective of just thinking about the long-term viability of the game. And you don't want to introduce power creep. And for those of you who don't know, this is basically how power creep would work, right? So new players right now are sitting here looking at these 3 summoners, which are, for sure the best in the game, and saying, these are unaffordable, which for most people they 100% are. I deserve a summoner that is cheap, that is just as good as these 3. And that's what I push back on, because that creates sort of an unsustainable card creation, mechanism in the game. Because what will happen is, let's say they do that. They introduce 3 more summoners that are on par with these guys. They're really difficult to beat. And it creates lots of, overpowered synergies in the game. A year from now, right? Like right now, you're here early enough for those new cards that you'll be able to accumulate the ones you want. You'll get them leveled to the level you want. You'll be all happy, right? like some of the older players are now that have seen this sort of massive increase in some of these card prices. A year from now, if we keep seeing the player growth and price appreciation that we have seen in the past over the long term in this game, the new players at that point are going to be saying the same exact thing that you were saying. These cards are too expensive, they're too good, I can't compete. I need cheap summoners that are just as good as the Chaos Legion legendary airdrops. I deserve those. You can see how that creates like an unsustainable situation when every set of new players will want and expect more and more powerful cards. Ultimately, that breaks the game. If they have one or two, I would say, potentially game-breaking cards, why would they want to introduce more, right? And they'll probably, over time, cards will slip through, right? And I'm sure if they could go back, they wouldn't have Yodin and Kitty be as powerful as they are. Maybe not even Scarred Llama. Again, I call him the half because he's more situational to me. But anyways, maybe if they could go back, they would make Kitty 1 speed and maybe replace True Strike with something else. Balance out the card a little bit. If they could go back, maybe Yodin, instead of plus archery, plus health, and blast, you get rid of the plus archery and you do like 2 health, or maybe even give them a shield, right? But take away some of the damage capability with the blast. Scarred Llama, maybe instead of the cleanse, you give it the heal and get rid of the health, or do 1 health or something. Because the problem with Scarred Llama is, if you try to afflict or stun whoever ends up in last stand, it just gets cleansed away. So you just bring a healer and you can't stop their heal ever. But if the Scarred Llama didn't have cleanse and Scarred Llama was responsible for the heal, you would then be able to consistently afflict or stun or whatever the monster in last stand, and it would be a slightly more balanced card. If they could go back, I bet they wouldn't make these as powerful as they could, as they are. So it's not to say a Untamed or a Chaos Legion legendary summoner won't slip through and end up being this powerful. But I can tell you they're not sitting there right now as they design these summoners thinking we need to make a summoner that's going to break the game and that we're ultimately going to have to build counters for. In an ideal world, they'll never have, and introducing counters is going to be my second point, but in an ideal world, they would never have to introduce specific counters to specific cards like they have for both Llama and Yodin. And I think that's part of the reason you've seen sort of the price separate with Kitty from these two a little bit, is there's now way more ways to play against these two cards than there previously were. You don't want to have to introduce counters. That's what you do when there is a game-breaking card to sort of level out the playing field. But in an ideal setting, when you introduce a card, the game remains balanced, but things just shift a little bit. There are new strategies pop up. New synergies start to work well. But it doesn't break the game. So they're not sitting there, designing a card that is specifically going to be as game-breaking as these three. Now to point 2. What they can do, and what they have done extremely successfully, is when they get cards like these that are super, super powerful, they should introduce counters to them via new cards, new abilities. They've specifically done a really good job with the new abilities that help you level out the playing field. And these 2 cards right here, perfect situations for them. Let's start with the Scarred Llama. So what did they introduce? They introduced a while back. Let me get off summoners here. They introduced something called, I'm only in legendaries, that should be fine. They introduced something called Death Blow, right? So when this, in Death Blow, your monster does 2 times damage if their target is the only monster left on the enemy team. That's what triggers Last Stand, when your opponent when your opponent's monster is the last one left on their team. So this card specifically, if it's left when your opponent's in last stand, is going to do 2x the damage. And this one was almost specifically built to counter one of the most problematic synergies in the game, which was Llama Cube, because it also has the Oppress. And Llama Cube you really see in poison rule sets, and you see Llama a lot in the poison rule sets, and you have immunity here, right? But they introduced a ton of cards in the new, as you can see, these are all brand new cards through Chaos Legion. He does not have, oh, why does he have, why is, oh, it's his name. Sorry, he doesn't have it. It's these 6 cards here that have it. So they introduced an ability directly into the game that would counter Last Stand. And they also did some other things. Recharge is a pretty good Last Stand counter if you know Llama's coming. Specifically, Zyvax at the highest levels. If you combine Death Blow with Recharge, you'll wipe out that Last Stand monster in 1 turn. Then let's go to Yodin. They introduced 2 new abilities somewhat recently that help you deal with Yodin. The first one being Amplify. You know, and they even built a summoner around it, right? So Yodin, you see a lot of archery damage. So what do? They build an ability called Amplify that will help you with return fire, right? So when you're spamming this Yodin blast damage, I would also say right away, right, they built a summoner that was designed, why am I only on Grandmaster? Oh, sorry, I still had Amplify typed in. They built a summoner with specifically designed to go at Yodin. But they realized it wasn't enough, so they added an ability that would help, right? And they even gave it to a summoner. So you can now combine Little Deep Swimmer with an Amplify monster and throw all of that archery damage back at Yodin. Grandmaster Rathe, same setup. I had an entire video about how you can use Grandmaster Rathe to counter Yodin. And that wasn't enough. They did something else too. They just released a new ability, Reflection Shield, where the monster doesn't take blast damage. So now, if you're expecting a Yodin, you just toss out a tank with Taunt, or any monster with Taunt. You add the Reflection Shield, and this guy has Reflection Shield all the way at Bronze. You put Venator out, and he won't take any blast damage. So it really, really, really takes sort of blast off the table for Yodin. Yodin's still a fantastic card, 100%. Same with Llama. They're still amazing cards. There's a reason why they're so expensive. But they aren't as game-breaking anymore. There are counters, and more sort of are popping up every day for these cards. But now to Kitty. So I will say, it's hard to imagine a great counter for Kitty. And I think that's part of the reason why we haven't had it yet. And I think that's part of the reason why Kitty has maintained its value and will continue to maintain its value. And why I continue to own it despite these prices. You know, typically, as you guys know, when a card runs up in price, I sell it. Even if it's amazing, right? If it runs up way more than the market, or if it maintains its value way more than the market. It's what I did recently with Kron. Where is it? I sold my Kron, I think it was for like $100 for BCX. It's now down at like 75, right? There's been some battles here. Obviously, there's not a ton of copies. But it's hard to like, and I challenge you in the comments, please. What's an ability, or what's a combination of abilities that could counter Kitty? Sort of, they tried it with the Affliction, right? But that just gets cleansed away. You know, there's a bunch of summoners that reduce, or they added Quicks, which reduces speed. Try to level that out, but then the True Strike. So even if you come at a huge speed play against a Kitty and try to like go over the top with that to slow down Kitty or make yourself super fast, Kitty still doesn't miss. So it's really, really, really difficult to think of like a realistic ability to counter Kitty. Honestly, the best I could do, and I actually got this from Pokemon. Do you remember in Pokemon when your Pokemon would be confused, it would attack itself? Or it would have a chance to attack itself? I'm thinking about something similar to Kitty in that ability called Confusion. And what it would do was, if you played a monster with Confusion, basically both summoners, yours and the other in your opponent's summoner, would get confused and start fighting for the other team. So basically what effectively would happen is you would switch summoners as long as the monster with Confusion stayed alive. So if you saw someone was spamming Kitty, let's say for example you had a Broken Arrows rule set where you can't play any ranged, maybe you toss out General Sloan, you know they're going to play Kitty, and then you play their Confusion monster. That was really the only idea I could come up with, and I've thought about this for a while. And again, that's part of the reason why I purchased Kitty, because I think ultimately it's going to be Kitty from this set that remains super, super, super game-breaking. Now, my final point, if we isolate this to, let's say, and these game developers are very smart, so I'm sure they are working on and testing things that could potentially make Kitty less powerful. I just think it's going to be really difficult to do so. But the Kitty problem takes care of itself. So do these two as well. But let's just isolate this to Kitty for now. Let's go to Kitty for a second. There are 12 cards available. One of them is 3. So there is 14 BCX available on the market right now. This is it. This is what you're looking at. So if someone right now were coming into the game and wants to buy a max level version of Kitty, only one person can do that. And that will include them having to buy ones that are $750, $600 per BCX. It's, you know, there's not new kitties that are popping up throughout the game. So if you fast forward a year from now or 2 years from now, and we've seen high levels of player growth, the Kitty problem takes care of itself. Because as more players enter the game, the chances you're going to come up against someone with Kitty are going to decrease exponentially. It's already a pretty uncommon card, and it's only going to become more and more uncommon. So it's going to be phased out of normal gameplay, and it's going to be a rare occurrence that you actually come up against one. You know, is it a situation where when you do play a player with Kitty, you probably aren't going to win? That could still be true. But what it's going to do is decrease the likelihood that you actually even come up against somebody with Kitty, because there are going to be the percentage of the player base that has a Kitty is going to be so small. And that's sort of the crux of what I'm getting at, is thinking about this longer term. You don't want to introduce a card that is just as good as Kitty. You'd rather have Kitty be either one, come up with counters like they have for the other two sort of quote unquote game breaking cards, or let it slowly phase out. You know, sit there and be like, yeah, that card is really, really insanely powerful. You know, wish we didn't make it that crazy, but now, you know, only 0.01% of accounts own a Kitty. So it's just really not a problem anymore. And you know, when you do come up against one, like, take a picture of it because it's rare and that person either spent a lot of money or is an OG of the game. And you know, it becomes sort of like a novelty situation. I'm going to end it there, but basically to me, that's a better approach than subjecting yourself to power creep. And that's why, again, I totally understand. I'm at this weird point. I totally understand new players. I'm at a weird point where I don't have all of the crazy untamed cards. It's cost prohibitive for me to do so. I get it. I don't have a bunch of gold cards. But I'm someone who's thinking about the long-term viability of the game. And the best way for you to, you know, get more powerful and more powerful cards is to keep playing the game and sort of put your time in, and be ready for when that super powerful card does slip through. You know, pounce on it, buy it before everyone else does. recognize a card's value before the rest of the game does. You know, that's the best way for you to sort of accumulate this power and these great cards at a low and effective cost. You got to be here early. You got to pay your dues. Like the people who got these really powerful cards super cheap, you know, again, I'm at the halfway point. Part of it is they're putting their money into a less proven game, a riskier game. And that's part of their reward, right? They got really powerful cards because they believed in this game. They heard about this game and put their trust in this game before everyone else. And that's not to say that you guys shouldn't, or new players, myself half included, shouldn't be able to catch up. It's just now that the game's more stable and there's slightly less risk than there was a year ago, you know, you got to pay to play more, right? Like if you want to play at these high levels with the most expensive cards, you're gonna have to put some money in. Either it's from increased rental prices for these crazy cards, or if you know, have the bankroll to buy one, which I know a lot of people don't. But yeah, I would say don't expect a card as crazy as that. I think it would be bad for the long-term viability of the game to sort of get in this cycle. Maybe one slips through. It'd be awesome if it did. You know, I want a card just as powerful as these two. Like I'm sitting here, you know, I plan on having all of the Chaos Legion Legendary Summoners. I'm hoping that some of these are great. I'm just not expecting it. You know, selfishly I want it, but when I'm thinking about the long-term viability of the game, which is sort of my most important thing, or else I wouldn't have made the investment in this game that I have, I would prefer them to work in counters and work in cards that better balance out the game than more cards that are potentially game-breaking. Okay, I'm gonna end it there. You know, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. It's always an interesting conversation when I get to talk about something like this. I look forward from hearing from you. Please, please, please like and subscribe. It's an awesome time to be playing this game, and it's a great time to be making content. You know, and I really, really appreciate all the support you guys have given me. All right, have a great day.